everyone. Welcome to a live episode here of the Cine-Files on the Cine-Files YouTube channel, where we're breaking down 2011's Thor from the Marvel Studios. I am the Outlaw John Rocha, and I'm joined by my brother in the Cine-Files love, Steve Morris. How are you, Steve?
I am good. I was just telling you off the camera that some VR boxing has kicked my ass today. But other than that, I'm feeling pretty good.
Did it feel like a hammer, like you were hit by a hammer, Thor's hammer Mjolnir, while you were doing that workout? Can I ask?
A little bit. You know, there should be, I think we need more like Marvel workouts in VR.
Oh, yes.
Like, I think that would be a major moneymaker.
Look, if they could take Kumail Nanjiani and make him look like that for Eternals, there should absolutely be officially sanctioned Marvel workouts that you can do on an app or something. I agree with you.
100%. You would make so much money, and I would do them.
You know? There you go. Well, Steve, tell the fans why we are jumping into this Marvel situation here. Thank you to everyone who's joining us live here. But you kind of pitched me this idea, and it seemed like a great idea of us to kind of revisit these Marvel movies and kind of celebrate them. Those that have been around for more than 10 years, as our arbitrary rule is. And we kind of talked about how many we're going to try to celebrate on their actual anniversary. And there are some that we're going to do and give the full Cine-Files treatment to, and some that we're not going to do the full Cine-Files treatment to. And recently we just did the Incredible Hulk and Iron Man 2, I think last month as a live show, as a twosome. This is Thor, or Kenneth Branagh's Thor from 2011. Why are we focused on doing this? Did you think it was just time for us to start focusing on it? What inspired this idea?
You know what it really is there are a couple of great Marvel movies I am genuinely excited to talk about.
Right.
And I, this is so sad, but you know me, I'm kind of a completionist. Like there's so many series of books where I have, you know, the first one was great and the second one was pretty good and the third one not so much, and by the 10th book, they're pretty bad, but I still feel compelled to read them all because I have to complete the whole thing.
Yeah,
and so, like, I felt like that to kind of get a full look at the Marvel universe, this would be a fun way to do it. And what it means is that for this 6 months or 9 months or a year, we're doing way too many Marvel movies. You know, like we would never do this about anything else. But once we get caught up, then it's just one or two a year. You know,
right,
which isn't a big deal. And some of them will be live shows. And then when we get to things in like 2027, like Infinity War, that'll be amazing. By then, the Cine-Files will be 38 hours long per episode.
Absolutely. We'll have 500,000 subscribers and followers. It'll be massive by that.
But we need to have 500,000 subscribers way before 2027.
I agree with you 1,000%. We got to make that happen for sure. But yeah, so we're talking about 2011's Thor. Ladies and gentlemen, the Streamlabs and SuperChats are open during this discussion. So if you have some questions or comments and you want to send in some support for the Outlaw Nation, for the Cine-Files, send in some support for the things we're talking about here and for our show overall, then please feel free. Some of you all watching, you don't contribute Patreon, you want to send a one lump sum thing. This is a time to do it. If you're watching it right now, you can send us Streamlabs. We prefer Streamlabs because YouTube takes 50% of the super chats. So with Streamlabs, that's a more immediate thing that goes in to help us do all the things that we do for the Cine-Files. And certainly, if you're not a patron, that's the next step for you. Patreon.com/the Cine-Files for you to join us and join at a tier that works for you, so you can get the benefits that work for you as well. Steve, this is 2011's Thor. Kenneth Branagh directing this. I was just in a room literally 8 feet away from Kenneth Branagh two nights ago for the Hollywood Critics Association, and they gave him like a Lifetime Achievement Award, and I got to see this incredible breadth of his work as a video package, incredibly well-edited video package, and watch Branagh react to it. What a gift to be in the room to see one of my favorite actors / directors, creators, the man who introduced me to what filmed Shakespeare can actually be, how powerful it can be, to sit there and watch his own work and watch him react to it. It was so moving and incredible. And now, 2 days later, we're talking about one of his films that has Shakespearean vibes to it, that has an interesting scope and scale to it, and that launched Chris Hemsworth overall as an unknown Australian actor to lead actor status. I know we'd seen him in 2009 Star Trek as Kirk's dad, but it was a really short role.
Right.
This was the one that kind of established the idea of Thor. And Steve, you and I have both been comic books fans for a long time. Thor is one of those characters that we didn't know could make the jump to a theatrical interpretation because of some of the admitted overdone cheesiness at times in certain runs of Thor. So to see it come off in Kenneth Branagh's hands, what did you think about this film overall? And what did you think about what Branagh did with the character of Thor and Chris Hemsworth himself, bringing it to life?
Well, first of all, I just think that's so cool that you were so close to Kenneth Branagh. I just watched Belfast,
No, yeah.
which the first half of it, I was like going, okay, this is an interesting movie. The second half, it worked me. Once it sort of settled in, and it's a beautiful, beautiful film. It's like the antithesis of Thor.
Yeah.
Although it is a father-son relationship on some level. So I think it's so funny. I have mixed feelings about Thor.
Okay.
I love Chris Hemsworth.
Yes.
I think he was a total find. And it's so interesting to me that look at how Marvel started. They don't have Spider-Man. They don't have the X books. And so we have the Hulk movie, which is a difficult character. Then you go to Iron Man, which was, in my mind, at best, a third-tier Marvel character.
Yeah.
I mean, back in the day, he was a big character, but when I came up in comics in the 80s, it was all about the X-books and Spider-Man. Those were the important characters. And then you go to Thor, and it's just as you say. It's like, have there been great runs on Thor, like the Walter Simonson run on Thor? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But Thor was never like the go-to character. So the fact that they chose to do him next, and I think, while I don't think the movie is great, I think they figure out, it's like they figure out Thor in steps, and they figure out Thor part of his personality really well in this movie, and then they really figure him out by the time we get to Ragnarok. You know,
the different directors that step in to kind of give you the elements of Thor. That's a great way to put it, Steve. The construction of the character over these three movies. It's really, I think it's criminally underappreciated. All three of the Thor films. Of course, the third Thor film, everybody loves Ragnarok, pretty much universally beloved. But I think Thor: Dark World has some good elements in it that I enjoy. It is not an unenjoyable movie. This first movie, I do enjoy it, but it does feel like a movie of its time. Do you know what I'm saying? Where they were still figuring out what the MCU was, what the magic was of making it work within the MCU. And there are moments where it feels like it drags a little bit, or feels a little bit like, oh, we're out in the desert and they're fighting this steel thing that just shoots lava lasers from its eyes. That we have Loki, but Loki isn't as active of a villain as we would like him to be. And as he becomes in Avengers, he isn't as active in Thor as we would like him to be, even though we go deep into this mythology of Asgard and what have you. With the Frost Giants, it doesn't 100% feel like we have a full-on antagonist or villain here that Thor is necessarily fighting.
I don't think Loki makes sense in this movie. I keep trying to figure out why he's doing what he's doing. And it's hard. Like, you have this, obviously, Tom Hiddleston has proven that his charisma in that character is like, this is someone that people adore. And he's good in this, but it's like, first it seems like he kind of manipulates. First he calls in the Frost Giants to bust up Thor's, coronation or whatever. Then he kind of manipulates him to attack the Frost Giants. And it's like, well, were you thinking about doing that when you brought them in? Because it sounds like he wasn't. He was just messing with the coronation. And then when Thor turns it into a fight, he Loki says, "Damn," as if he didn't want Thor to do that.
You're right.
But it's Thor doing that actually gets him, the power. And it's like, and so Loki's just kind of all over the place. And I don't think his character is completely figured out in terms of what is he actually trying to do, other than that he's a trickster and he's messing with people.
Yeah. I mean, and also we do get the sibling drama here that's very universal, very identifiable. The second child, and then him finding out that he was actually a Frost Giant. So his we've seen this on numerous of those special episodes on sitcoms where you find out the actual truth about a character. And here in this movie, you find out that he is a Frost Giant, and that Odin adopted him after he had essentially subjugated the Frost Giants and what have you. So now there's even more of a division within the sibling rivalry. We're not even related by blood. So it becomes that kind of battle. And it's fascinating to see, because I think you're seeing both Hemsworth and Hiddleston at the beginnings of their careers as actors, embracing their strength as leads, and also the beginning of their relationship with each other in these roles as it progresses. Because by the time it gets to Ragnarok, it is a very well-oiled machine between them. And I think Dark World does a great job of kind of pushing that relationship forward after the death of their mom, Frigga. There's a lot that gets explored with both of them as they work together to take down Christopher Eccleston's character, the Dark Elf there. But in this, there's, as you said, he is thoroughly the god of mischief because he doesn't seem to have a plan. He's just about creating chaos and then indulging whatever infantile desire he has in the moment, irregardless of what the ultimate result is going to be. I don't know that he has an ultimate goal that he's trying to achieve.
You know what? I just figured out what the problem is. Is that if you go, what is the cathartic, important, life-changing moment for Loki in the movie?
Yeah,
it's discovering that he's actually a frost giant, that Odin's not his dad. That's the big thing.
Right.
But they don't have him go through a character transformation at that moment.
Right.
Is that if you had him be a trickster and always sort of smarter and ahead and playing games with people, but fully pro Odin, maybe a little jealous of Thor, but fully like loves dad. And then he finds out this truth and then he turns, that would make more sense. But calling the biggest enemies into, letting them into Asgard, into like where the treasures are kept.
Yeah.
That's not a little thing. That is a big, he's already doing evil things. Yeah. Therefore, there's no transition when he finds out this piece of information. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fair. And as for the Thor journey here, that's really the focus of this movie. This is essentially a Tom Cruise movie where you have the arrogant first act of Thor here, thinking that everything should be handed to him because everything's been easy to him. He is essentially a god. He is good looking. He can sleep with whoever he wants. He can kick anyone's ass. And so naturally he feels, and it's an element of white privilege now looking back. We didn't use that term back then really in the mainstream audience of analysis. Now looking back, it's very clear this is a white privilege movie in the first quarter or the first part of the movie, first act of the movie, because everything is so easy to him. Everything is given to him. He can kick anyone's ass. And so he thinks naturally he deserves the throne and what it is. And then he can indulge his anger or his rage or his petulance whenever he feels like it because he's never lost. And so for him, it feels like a natural arrogance or a natural thing to do, even though it looks arrogant from the outside. And this is the thing that eventually lands him in hot water with Odin when he goes back and attacks the Frost Giants for their coming in to try to take back the casket of ancient winters. And he gets his title stripped from him. He gets everything stripped from him and he lands back on Earth. Now, Loki loves this because now it means Loki has a straight beeline to the throne. But what ends up happening is Thor goes on, as we said, the Tom Cruise journey of realizing his arrogance was wrong, realizing the mistakes he was realizing to care for these human creatures, and including Jane Foster, played by Natalie Portman, that he has to come to terms with the fact that he was not a good person and he had to grow. And because he's a hero, he does grow, as opposed to what you mentioned, Loki. There's no arc. There is an arc here for Thor. So what did you think about how they constructed the arc here throughout the story and the script and the film itself?
So I think it's really interesting that Iron Man is a story about an arrogant jerk who has a comeuppance and then realizes, who he has been and he changes. And this is the same thing. Yeah. I think, and what's so funny is I think arrogant Thor is way less likable than arrogant Tony Stark. Like Tony Stark, as much as he's a complete jerk in the beginning of the movie, Robert Downey Jr. is so charming that you're just kind of enjoying it anyway. Whereas Thor is an idiot. He's arrogant. He's just terrible, for the
He's a rich kid. Yeah. He's a rich kid. Yeah. No, I think you make an excellent point because they do have that moment with Stark and the young army dude before they get attacked, taking the pictures, making the jokes. He's very charming, as you said, when he's out. And then when he gets thrown in with the scientist there in the cave, you can tell there's a genuine desire to connect. There isn't an arrogance there. He may be aggressive, he may be abrasive in trying to achieve a goal, but his overall nature is not necessarily one of dismissiveness to someone he sees as an equal, or someone he sees as in the same boat as him, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I think it's the you see the essential good heart with Tony Stark as you move forward. He's still arrogant and he's still a jerk and he still, does all his Tony Stark stuff, but you know that he's a good person. And I think it's very much the same transformation with Thor. Thor at the beginning, all he's interested in is showing his own power.
Yeah.
That's all he wants to, he's not listening to dad at all, which by the way, I always go like, you're a young guy, but you're essentially immortal. You've been alive for 1,000+ years.
Right.
You're still not listening to dad. It's like, dude, grow up. Like, come on. Like Odin is, well, it's so funny because I always go through things where I'm kind of like, we want to believe that Odin is a great dad and he's a wise man and a wise king and a wise god and knows what he's doing, but clearly he is not. Because his 2 sons are really fucked up.
Yeah. Well, just like, hey, look, how many stories have we read about famous people who accomplish so much and are doing so many things, but the cost is their relationship with their own children, which is the ironic cost of their ability to spread joy or spread incredible things or create incredible things in the world that other children will be able to use in a positive way and appreciate. The actual children of creators sometimes, or famous men or women even, are sometimes suffer the brunt of they're missing all the time. And certainly it seems like, and we find out in Ragnarok that Odin has been conquering for quite some time. And Thor has certainly been allowed to have the run of the house, even with Frigga, who is a good mom. I would say there is Thor, there is a little bit of indulgence to Thor. So in a way, Odin has kind of created this situation himself by being a bit of an absentee father. And so he wants his son to learn, and his son gets stripped, and he has to go on that journey there, meeting Jane Foster, as I mentioned, Natalie Portman, meeting Darcy Lewis, they're played by Kat Dennings, and Dr. Eric Selvig, played by Stellan Skarsgard. And he, gets to know them. And then his warriors come down when they find out that Loki is trying to take over the throne because of Odin's Odin sleep. And and he sends the destroyer down there to kill Thor, to kill the warriors, the Lady Sif and all them. And in the end, Thor is the one who offers himself up. And that's what ends up bringing the hammer back to Thor, because when he lands on that earth, he can't pick up the hammer. So he has to deal with the fact that he's unworthy. What do I do when the thing that I most relied upon as a symbol of my strength is removed from me? I can either slip into a state of just feeling terrible about myself and never finding my way back out of it, or work to realize what it is I need to do to find my way back, and people love an underdog story. Even when this guy is a rich kid, Steve, it still is a bit of an underdog story after he loses his powers and he's stripped of Mjolnir.
Well, I mean, that's a classic thing. The mighty have now fallen, and that's where they're going to learn deep lessons. And we got lots of stories that are like that. My question for you is, do you buy it? Do you feel like he really goes through enough that he's really changed?
Yeah, and as I said, I don't 100% buy it, because as I said, this is still the beginnings of the MCU. I don't think they know exactly the right formula yet to really get people to enjoy it for the most part. And so they're still kind of figuring it out and finding their way, or feeling their way in the dark a little bit here to try to get it right. And it shows in a movie like this. And look, Branagh is a damn good director. He can direct a movie. Can he direct some bad ones like Artemis Fowl? Yes, but he's a damn good director for the most part. So he is bringing his Shakespearian vision here, the father and son issues, the sibling issues, meeting, losing power, right? As you said, the fall from grace, the mighty have fallen. King Lear is all about that, right? The arrogance of King Lear and his daughters, kicking them out, kicking Cordelia out because she won't kiss his ass like the other 2 daughters do. And he ends up losing the whole kingdom and realizing that the fool is the one that's been telling him the truth from the beginning, the person he dismissed, and then has to kind of climb his way back up to try to repair that relationship, because he was lost in his own hubris and arrogance. And essentially that's there are elements of that here, even though, Thor's not an old man, there are elements of that here. And I think that's why they brought in Branagh. And But it's also why Taika's version works better, Steve, because you can't take Shakespeare too seriously in order to fully enjoy it. And I think they kind of defaulted to Branagh bringing that element to it in the first film, but then you had to kind of break that to kind of fully release the character as they did in Thor Ragnarok.
So first of all, I think in general, Lear is a better script than Thor. That's my personal opinion. Some people might disagree. But I think this whole,
how dare you?
That's awful. I also think, by the way, this is totally off the topic, but I just saw that there is now a 4K release of Ron.
Yes. Arrow is doing it, I think.
Yeah. Speaking of Lear, because there's only been like a terrible old transfer forever. I haven't watched it in a long time.
Oh, yeah.
I can't imagine how amazing that movie is going to look in 4K.
I agree. And that sounds like a future Cine-Files episode, in my opinion. So
sure.
I'm happy to do that.
It's a lot of a movie. So back to Shakespeare and Branagh. I think that's totally the idea. We have this heightened language. Mm-hmm. It's a Shakespearean story. We're going to bring the Shakespeare guy in. I think it's a mismatch. Because I don't think it's Shakespeare. Yeah. You know, I can't say I like Kenneth Branagh a lot. I've loved a bunch of his movies. I don't know if he was phoning it in on this one, but like, I don't feel just because you're having people speak with these and thous doesn't mean it's Shakespeare. You know what I mean? Right. And I think it was treated more like a comic book movie than I wish it was in the older, badder sense, which is it wasn't taken like, and I'll tell you two things I really don't like.
Sure.
I really don't like many of the design elements of Asgard, particularly the ridiculous helmets and there's just so
too much. It's too
much. Yeah. It just looks silly to me and it doesn't look like it has any purpose other than being, gigantic. And the thing that they said was they wanted everything to be totally pristine. So there's not a scratch, not a piece of dust, nothing out of place. Everything is perfect. And I think that's a total mistake because I think this is actually a place where people live and it should have been lived in, not dirty, but like a place that feels like these people are here, and that when you get to Ragnarok, I think some of those things change a bit. And then even they go to the world of New Mexico, which again feels like a totally built on a set. Yeah. This is a set version of a small town in New Mexico. You've driven across the country. I've driven across the country. Yeah. That's not what those towns look like. Like they're not. And so even if you wanted to have Asgard be totally pristine and perfect, well, then all the more reason to make the town in New Mexico real and gritty and feel like those places. So there's this, and the way,
it's like a pop-up town. You're not wrong there. I agree with you.
Yeah, it's not. And so they're all, so those design elements are kind of separating me from the movie. And I think, I think one of Marvel's ideas is we'll bring in a really good director. We don't have to worry about them with the special effects because that's a different department. You know what I mean? Yeah. They're going to work with the actors and then we're going to do all the action scenes. And I don't like the way a lot of the action scenes are shot. And part of it is it's kind of earlier CGI and they haven't figured all this stuff out. But like, it's so old school in the terms of here's the big effect, cut to the humans, cut to the effect. And they're not integrated in a way that makes me feel like if you think about Jurassic Park, which is way earlier.
Yeah.
They're always putting the humans near the effect or having them interact with them in a way that makes you feel like you're there. And I don't think they do that in this film at all. Okay. It's either special effect or it's humans,
That's fair. This Philip Bryan said, can't stay. Saw you were live and wanted to drop in. Well wishes. I'll catch the show later today. Thanks, Philip. Later today.
Thanks.
Where are you at, Philip? Is it only morning where you're at? Or are you in Australia? Tell me, where are you at? Later today. We have a couple Streamlabs that have come through here. Steve, Chris just donated $10. Thank you, Chris. Very kind of you.
Thank you.
Brennan Marr donated. Hey, Brennan. Good to see you. Brennan says, hey, John and Steve. I've always really liked this film because it's the movie that got me locked into the MCU. Something I really admire is how Branagh, as I've been corrected by a number of British people recently, Branagh was able to handle both the big Shakespearean drama and the earthbound hilarity. Do you agree with Brennan? Did you find some earthbound hilarity in this?
I think the best moments are the comedic moments. Thor throwing the coffee mug down.
Yeah.
That is where the movie is totally working for me.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I 100% agree with that, Brendan. And what Steve said, absolutely. The humor is what works here. The other stuff feels a little overdone, a little overcooked. And I think it's again, I don't think they were 100% sure on what they would. And plus, you're transferring Thor, Steve. As I said, it's one of the most difficult characters to transfer over because most of the runs in Thor is grandiose and these large helmets and these huge hammer and swords and these big, the big red cape and the boots and the helmet itself. All of it is so grandiose that maybe they felt that was the way to honor the actual intention of or the actual creation of the character in the comics. And now looking back on it, we find that it's not as I don't know, it's not as it wouldn't have been the first choice nowadays to go that route with that character.
I think what we discovered was that Chris Hemsworth is really fucking funny.
Yes, 100%.
And that was sort of, as we get to, the journey to Ragnarok is like, oh no, we know what we can do. And sometimes, you see this in TV shows all the time where the show starts and they haven't quite figured out the character. And by the second season, they go, oh, this is what is really working. And it's the humor that really works with Thor.
Yeah, Parks and Rec is a perfect example of that. Don't ever watch the first season. Watch that. Start with the second season, and you will love that show for sure. Let's move on to the Jane Foster question here, Steve. We have Natalie Portman coming back for Thor: Love and Thunder, which a lot of people thought wasn't going to happen because she kind of made it clear in coded language and sometimes on the point language that she wasn't happy with how Jane Foster was constructed in the first two Thor movies, especially in this movie, and a lot of MCU fans felt there wasn't any real chemistry between Thor and Jane Foster in either of the first two movies, although they tried hard. Would you agree with that? Would you agree that there wasn't much chemistry between these two? And what do you feel about how they handled Jane Foster in the first two movies, or in the first movie?
In general, I almost always like Natalie Portman.
Yeah.
I think she's, even in some movies, there's like this trilogy whose name I can't remember, that I don't like the trilogy very much, but I think she's good in it.
Yeah.
I can't remember what that thing was. It was like 20 years ago. I don't know.
Trilogy?
Big space thing. Don't worry about it. It's not
okay.
important.
Fair enough. Was there another person involved who might be coming back to reprise something in that trilogy? I don't know.
I think there was. Yes.
There might be.
Yes. I don't know. We see so many movies. It's not that important.
It's
but I genuinely like her. I think like there are moments, like the moment where he, gets the hammer back and uniforms up and she goes, "Oh my God." It's great and really funny. I think they're fine together. I don't think but I agree. Her character is here's the smart science woman who doesn't really do anything. In fact, it's Stellan Skarsgard who does the active choices.
Yeah.
She's just kind of there as I'm the love interest. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I understand why she's not all that thrilled with the part.
Yeah. And that may explain why in the second film they turn Stellan Skarsgård, obviously because Loki's been inside him, as we find out in the post-credit scene of this movie. And so Jane has to be the one that kind of coordinates everything and makes sure certain things happen in certain ways so they can, defeat the Dark Elf there that Eccleston is playing. And so that may be that they kind of, because also Natalie, remember 2011 is not 2022 Natalie Portman. Like she is also still kind of figuring out how much of her voice she can push forward as an actress to kind of hone and shift the character to work for what she wants the character to do. I mean, one of the two big criticisms of Marvel at the beginning are how they treat their female characters and how those villains that aren't that interesting for the most part. And it becomes an issue. And one of the cases they cite is this movie because of that destroyer being this voiceless, nameless villain that just comes down and shoots lava darts out of its face or lava rays out of its face. So that's one of the issues there. I agree. I like her in the movie, but I don't know that I buy that there's that much chemistry. And even in the second film, I don't buy that there's that much chemistry as well. Now, what about Loki's plan here, Steve? Because Loki's plan, we find out in the end, Loki's plan is essentially to win the love of his adopted father and prove himself. So in a way, his misguided attempts to do everything are a way to prove himself to his father. And Thor has to prove himself to his father down in New Mexico. And you would argue that what the fuck is wrong with this guy that he creates these unfair expectations of both of these children that they have to constantly satisfy him and prove their love to him, whether consciously or subconsciously.
So I remember when we did Black Panther a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
and we started talking about all the characters in the Marvel universe who have daddy issues. And it's almost all of them.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like there's so many of them. And it's so I don't think, again, I don't think Loki makes sense because, well, taking over the throne and banishing Thor and then having your dad assassinated is not really proving yourself to you know what I mean? Like, and it's like, did he want the throne before he found out that he was a frost giant kid? Would he have had dad assassinated? And his answer is probably not, but I don't see the transition that much.
Yeah.
I think I go, you know what I think the other big thing is? Do you think Thor has a bottom? Like, does he hit bottom? And if so, at what point? Like in the classic, addiction that because for this kind of a story, you should have a character hit the absolute bottom. They have to do a thing. They have to feel true shame and get to a place where they're ready to change. And he has some moments, but I don't think he actually goes to a place like, because I'm thinking about the Jane Foster relationship, and I go, if he betrayed her in some way, if he did something through his arrogance, through his lack of care, that was really messed up, and then saw the consequences of his actions and then truly repented. Because what they have now is it's just, I'm willing to sacrifice my life, and now I've proven myself worthy.
Yeah, this is a great point you bring up, because even when he lands on Earth and he's stripped of all his powers and stripped of Mjolnir, he immediately falls in with a beautiful scientist, her attractive sidekick, her intelligent scientist that she works for, and they help him. So there is no bottom where he's like, I have no one, I'm all alone. I have to figure this out on my own and find my way back and learn the lessons of finding my way back. Yeah, I mean, you could argue his bottom is essentially as soon as he lands on Earth, no powers, and he can't wield Mjolnir.
But he's still acting like an arrogant jerk.
Yes, exactly. So that's yeah.
Well, and you could say that, okay, Loki comes in, which is a brutal scene. I think it's a really good scene. Loki comes in and says, Dad's dead, and sorry, you got to stay here, and Mom doesn't ever want you to come back. I mean, that's fucked up. That is a really, really, and so that's near the bottom.
Yeah.
But then I think it's after that he goes out drinking with Stellan Skarsgard, and they're having a great time.
Yes, true.
And it's a totally funny, enjoyable scene, but it is not reckoning with this. Right. Oh my God, I'm all alone on this strange planet. I don't have my powers. I don't have anybody.
Right, because even Stellan Skarsgård is like, oh my God, you're from Norse mythology. He's initially hesitant, and then step by step kind of explores who Thor might be. And then, of course, Jane Foster, same thing. And she's turned on by him physically as well. So he's never without being like lauded or being without that feeling of like people revere him to a degree. So he never has to feel that rejection, that full rejection of everything around him. That's an excellent point you bring up.
You have to have, there should have been a scene where Darcy and Stellan Skarsgård and Jane Foster, they all turn their backs on him.
Yeah, right.
Because he behaves in such a way that just goes, no, fuck you. We don't need you around.
Yeah.
Like that's not, and in particular, if Jane gives him a talking to and kicks his ass with words.
Right.
To the point that, because then what it does is it elevates her and puts him beneath her and go, oh, this is a person who's not a god, but who I can learn from, who actually has my number and has figured me out. Well, then we would have some chemistry between, you know what I mean? Those are bases for a relationship. And then he has to, yes, sacrificing yourself does show nobility.
Right.
But it's not like Thor wasn't willing to go into a fight and die before. I mean, he always thought he was going to win, but
right.
I have another question, by the way, which is, I don't understand Thor's powers. How much of his powers are just from him being a god? How much more powers does he get when he actually has the hammer?
Right.
And because he still clearly can kick some ass when he's just a human.
Right.
So I'm just I don't know what his powers are without the hammer. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, clearly he has godlike abilities in terms of his his natural physical state is one of an elevated physical state, in that he's able to take an exorbitant amount of punishment and deliver an exorbitant amount of punishment.
Right.
The hammer is only an extension. It's always ever been just an extension of his power already. So, it's no different than someone who wields a bat or wields a hammer or wields whatever, or chainsaw if you've watched Peacemaker. It makes no difference. That's the extension of the power. So it just allows him to focus his power even more through the already magically enhanced hammer like Mjolnir. So it's just he's already naturally that story. He's essentially a Superman. He's essentially a Superman.
See, I always get the sense that without the hammer, he is what?
Sorry, because he can fly with the hammer as well.
Right. So I always get the sense that without the hammer, he's like this level of strong.
Yeah.
And then with with the hammer, it's like doubled.
Yeah.
And maybe it's you're right. It's and I think we see later on that he can do lightning stuff without the hammer.
Right.
If he really learns how to focus it. So maybe it's just helping him out. But it's also kind of where I go. Like, what's interesting is, the whole, they mentioned Donald Blake. And when I first read Thor comics, he was originally, it's just a human with a limp who becomes Thor, and then later on they say, no, that was Thor all along, I think is what but it would have been interesting if it's just a different movie. But if he really tried, like, we have him bust into the camp and just kick the shit out of everybody.
Yeah.
And it would, again, because I want to humble him more, it would be interesting if he went and took a swing at somebody and actually wasn't that tough anymore.
Right. A bigger dude knocks him out.
Yeah.
Right. And if you've seen What If, that happens in What If. For those of you who've seen one of the episodes of What If, and we explore what would life be like if that had happened to Thor. What would his story be if that had happened to Thor and he didn't get to the hammer? So yeah, I mean, that's a excellent point you bring up here, Steve. What did you think about the as a director, you're watching the movie, the pacing of the film? What did you think of the overall? Like, did they hit the right beats in the right moments in terms of emotion? Was it emotionally resonant in any way? Did you feel anything as you watched? So just tell me the pacing of it overall. Do you think it's a bit janky, or do you think it works?
I think it's a little all over the place. I think so. Like the Loki scene we were just talking about.
Yeah.
Man, that works. Loki finding out he's a frost giant totally works.
Yeah.
The throw in all the comedic moments, they totally work, but I don't think they always fit together. Like, I don't understand Coulson's motivations. Like, why does he let Thor go at that moment? And what, like, it doesn't all quite make sense to me.
Is he fanboying? Or is it an attraction? What do you think's going on there?
With Coulson?
Yeah.
I see it. There's a thing you could do in a movie where you go like, this person clearly has a plan.
Yeah.
Like, because Coulson lets him go like, we're gonna follow him or something like that.
Yeah.
But he clearly doesn't really have a plan. It just kind of seemed like he had it. Well, and this is like, does Coulson know about gods, and does he have any suspicion of what the hammer is?
I think he has an idea, right? Because remember, we're one movie away from him throwing the trading cards on the glass surface after he dies. So clearly he's aware. But I think this is our first exposure to Thor on Earth. So yeah, I think Coulson's kind of blown away by the fact that this guy even exists.
But does he think he's Thor? Why would he think he's Thor at the beginning? Because some guy tries to break into this weird facility where it's surrounding this hammer, tries to grab the hammer, has a lot of martial skills.
Yeah.
They capture him. Yeah. What on earth would make him think that this was a god?
It's a good question. William H. Bonney, you are not a god. So yeah, I mean, this is an excellent point you bring up here with this. I've always suspected that Coulson has some interest on that side of the fence. I'm not saying exclusively. I'm saying it's in play. And I've always felt that reaction to Thor in that moment was a little bit of an allusion to maybe a homosexual attraction or some form of attraction to him that may not be sexual in nature, but some form. Because maybe he's that kid who followed all the high school quarterbacks around and did their homework or whatever. And so he's got that, maybe that comes back to him in that moment, because it's a really odd reaction, what he lets Thor get away with.
Yeah. Well, I only watched a few episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Is this Is this a thing?
Don't ask me. I did not like that show, so I had never watched that. I watched 2 or 3 episodes of that show. I could not stomach it. It was not
same here. Although I heard it got better. I that's what I heard. Yeah. But there's only so many hours in the day, and there's way too much. Yeah, there's way too much stuff.
24 episodes a season. I'm not doing that. I'm not plugging that in the Shield. Yeah. What else you got? What other questions you got, man? You said you got questions.
What do you think of the casting of Anthony Hopkins as Odin?
It's the most perfect casting. It's so good. I mean, I love him as Odin, and especially, I mean, I do not watch Ragnarok once without crying when he walks away, when he dies. It is because he spends these first 2 movies really laying the groundwork of the kind of hard-ass dad that he is. And in the 3rd movie is the confrontation of all his sins.
Yeah.
And, we've seen this. You talk about the father-son issues throughout the Marvel movies. Certainly T'Chaka and T'Challa having them, and certainly here Odin and Thor having them as well. For Odin's own judgment of Thor in the first movie, here comes Thor with the knowledge of Hela and all that happened there to kind of turn the dynamic back around to him, to showcase, hey man, you were a pretty big jerk yourself. Who are you to judge me? Who are you to kind of go through that with me? But the casting of him, 100%, I love. I do enjoy Renee Russo, although I'm really mad they didn't do anything with her in the first movie. She does carry weight in the second movie when she passes, but that's because Renee Russo is a damn good actress. But there could have been more with her here in this first movie. But yeah, Hopkins is just so fantastic, dude. He can bellow those lines like nobody's business, man.
Yeah, the when he says, I forget what he calls Thor when he scolds him, but that scene is just great. No, he's awesome. I think all the supporting players are good. Like, I think every word that Darcy says is great.
Yeah. Oh yeah, she's great. Kat Dennings is fantastic in laying the groundwork of her character for sure. Yeah.
I'm less interested in Lady Sif in the Warriors 3. Like, you know what I remember? This is my experience. Is they showed up on screen and I'm like, oh, they're doing that, because I recognize it for the comic books, and then I don't really care about them that much.
Yeah, it's weird, right? Because I mean, it's Zachary Levi who ends up becoming Shazam down the road for the DC universe, and it's Ray Stevenson who is now, I think, what is Ray Stevenson? Oh yeah, he was Punisher for one of those Punisher movies, I think Warzone, and Jamie Alexander. And then I can't remember the Japanese, I think it's a Japanese actor who plays the other character. I'm looking up before I get in trouble and get canceled here. But yeah, and then you get Idris Elba, who's pretty much he's such a fantastic actor, but you don't give him much to do through the first 3 films. And especially here, he's just manning the Bifrost Bridge and having these conversations with Thor. But it isn't until Thor they actually give him an active role. Yeah.
And he has the most ridiculous of all the helmets, like just these huge things you could barely see his face. And it's like he's like the bus driver. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it's just, what a fucking waste of that actor.
Well, once again, this is Marvel at the beginning. And once again, before Black Lives Matter, before Me Too, using characters of color in a way that makes no fucking sense, and you turn them into token characters in your movie. Someone as accomplished and talented as Idris Elba, then you have essentially a barely 2-dimensional Jane Foster in Natalie Portman, a really 1-dimensional Frigga in Renee Russo. So you kind of are and even Jamie Alexander is essentially in love with Thor, but there's not more. There's no scenes with Jamie Alexander on her own. It isn't until we get to Loki that we get her having scenes without Thor on her own, which is really fun to see on the Loki TV series. So it's interesting how they develop this stuff, and I think they just weren't aware of, and maybe the public wasn't ready, maybe, to see that just yet. And they've certainly made up for it over the last few years and are still making up for it as they go forward. But yeah, when you go back and watch some of these films, they feel dated because of how they approach people of color and women and their roles in these movies.
Well, I think you cannot underestimate how hard it is to escape the locked in tropes of the past.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like the damsel in distress is like every fucking action movie and action story and comic book since the beginning. And so getting away from that and going, well, how could we do that a little differently? Is hard. It takes, and particularly when you got the same people writing the thing, and now they're expected to write it in a different way. It's like those 4 characters, they're just like kind of backgroundy supporty characters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They don't have a lot of, and they're literally kind of written as cliches.
Yes. Right?
And then they are cliches instead of, because them following Thor to the Frost Giant world at the beginning, it's just like, what are you doing? Like, why would you do this? It is such a stupid thing to do. And the fact that they go with him is weird,
Yeah, I'm going to correct something. Josh Dallas is the one who plays Fandral in this movie. Zachary Levi's in the second movie in Dark World. So my apologies there. And the Japanese actor who plays Hogan is Tadanobu Asano. So Tadanobu Asano is the one who plays him consistently all the way until Hela kills him in Thor Ragnarok. So yeah, you're right. They're not given much to do other than to kiss Thor's ass. They're not given much to do other than to be Thor's party buds. And maybe that's because in the way they were presenting this, Thor is seen as, this kind of character that has a lot to learn. And it isn't until later when they come to try to save him that he understands the value of their friendship. And maybe that's why you cast the actors that you cast in these roles, Steve, because they're not going to get a lot of screen time. So the audience has to immediately like them. So they need to have either some kind of energy or charm or able to make the most out of the least amount of screen time that they're going to get. That's maybe why you go with established actors like this rather than some B-movie actors that you can throw in to throw a couple of lines out there and pretend and be Thor's friends. Do you know what I'm saying? Maybe. I'm not saying it was right. I'm just saying maybe.
I mean, it's funny. I think that Thor is enjoyable. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no.
It's a totally enjoyable movie. It's just, I think that doesn't quite all deliver emotionally the way I think it's trying to, I guess is how I'd say it.
Yeah. Fair. We've spent some time like tearing this thing. Can we talk about things that you liked? What you just mentioned, you think overall you don't not enjoy the movie. So what are the things that work for you besides the humor, besides the scene with Loki and Thor there about their father? Are there any other things that you do like about the movie?
Well, I think so. I love Chris Hemsworth.
Yes.
I do think. Did you feel like his skin color was sort of washed out in this weird way in the first Thor?
Maybe, I don't know.
It's like something about
never had that thought, but maybe
that his eyebrows are slightly lightened or something. That
maybe they were making him very blonde. Maybe.
Yeah. So I like him a lot. I think the action sequence, the attack on the base with Hawkeye, who we haven't talked about yet, I think that's the best action sequence in the movie.
Yeah.
I think that's a lot of fun. Okay. I think that obviously Tom Hiddleston you can just see the charisma and how interesting that guy is. Yeah. I love going drinking with Stellan Skarsgård. I think that's a fun scene. Yeah. I think the moment, even though I don't feel like Thor earned it as much as I would like, the moment of getting the hammer back and suddenly becoming Thor, that is super, super satisfying.
Yeah.
The battle with Loki at the end, I don't like. I don't quite understand what's going on.
It feels weird. Yeah.
It's weird.
It feels like a tacked on story beat to lead to the Avengers. Like, we've got to get to the Avengers. So let's do this moment where Loki, let's go. And I think I think Hemsworth acts the shit out of that moment. And so does Hiddleston. But in the end, it doesn't really make sense because it seems like he's come to understand and want and appreciate his relationship with Thor and Odin, yet in the next movie he's trying to take over Earth. So it just doesn't 100% work to make sense that he goes all the way down, goes to Earth and takes over Selvig's body, as we see in the post-credit scene in this movie. It doesn't 100% work that he kind of realized things and still went evil, trying to take over an entire world.
Well, I don't think Loki, as much as I like the actor, and when you get to the Loki TV series, I think that's where his character makes the most sense.
Agreed.
But it's like there's, people have conflicts and forgive people.
Yeah.
But when you try to have me banished to Earth and try to kill me for me to forgive you, seems like a long way to go. But let's say I do, and then in the next movie, you go like, no, really, I'm going to be cool. And then you betray me again. And then you betray me in Avengers. And then it's like at a certain point, it's like, no, Loki's a terrible person. Why does Thor keep going back and trying to trust him? You know what I mean? I don't think they walk. There's a real tightrope to walk with that character to make his actions motivatable and still have us like him and not totally turn on him. I think it's really just that the actor is so great that we just want to stick with him.
Well, I want to address this thing that Sean Gardner is in here. I love Sean. Sean's a big MCU guy. So thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with us, Sean. He said, what had Idris Elba done pre-2011 or whenever Thor came out, was 2011? Maybe they didn't know what they had in him as an actor. Well, it's you asked that question, and we go before 2011. He had done a number of episodes of The Big C. He had been in Takers. He'd been in The Losers. He'd been in The Office as one of the potential people to take over The Office. Remember, after Michael Scott had left, he was a part of it, and he'd had a 7-episode run with them. He'd been in Rock and Rolla as one of the kind of co-leads of that film, along with Gerard Butler in that film for Guy Ritchie. He had been in This Christmas, which is a Black-focused Christmas movie. 28 Weeks Later, American Gangster. He'd been in The Gospel.
He's been in
The Wire.
The Wire, that's what I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah. So he had been in a number of things before 2011. He started acting back in the early 90s, the 1990s. So there was plenty of information that you would have had for him, that you could have had access to understand the kind of actor that you had. So I would say that he had a footprint,
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's that character isn't that interesting. Right. And, it's like they didn't give him very much to do. Yeah. And then they put him in a giant helmet that makes you impossible to see his face. Yeah. And they give him a character that can't move very much. I think by Ragnarok, they actually make him interesting, but here they really don't.
Yeah. Transit of Mars says, indeed, his eyebrows were bleached. Feige said it was one of the biggest mistakes he's made. LOL. So yeah, they were bleached. There you go.
It looks weird.
It does, doesn't it? Right? Yeah, that's a good point. Now that you pointed out, now I'm thinking about it. Like, oh yeah, maybe, yeah, okay. Good. It never occurred to me, but Eric Grebner says best cinematography in a Branagh film up until Murder on the Orient Express. Really? You don't think Dunkirk? Well, that's Nolan's, I guess.
I think there are a long list of movies I think have better cinematography for that, including Hamlet and Dead Again. Dead Again, is that what's called?
Dead Again, yes. The kind of noir mystery that he did after Henry V. Yes.
I think he's got a bunch of movies with good cinematography. But Belfast, oh my God. That looks amazing, that film.
Absolutely. J&B saying at work at the moment, so I have to watch this later, but just want to send in some love and to thank you guys for all the work you do. Oh, thank you, J&B.
Thank you, J&B. And J&B is a big Enterprise Incidents guy, so thank you for your support on that show too.
Very kind of you. Now let's move on here, Steve. Looking at the film itself, anything more do we need to do? We like Confiore or Confiore? Do we like the score? Patrick Doyle does the score for the movie here. That's Branagh's boy. Patrick Doyle did Henry V. That's what they both kind of got announced with. Is still the score that is my favorite score of any Branagh film. They played it at they played it all through the tribute at the Hollywood Critics, which just sent me to a whole nother level in the stratosphere. So, what do we think about Patrick Doyle's music in Thor?
Can I make a terrible admission? I can't even hear it in my head. I'm trying to think of what the score is, and I got nothing for you. I got nothing. What do you think about the score of Thor?
I think it's a good score. It's not a great score. It's not one of those great Marvel scores, but it's a unique score in the lexicon of the Marvel movies. This score is an unusual score. It fits for the movie that Branagh was trying to make. And maybe, like you said, the audaciousness of the designs and the helmets and the costumes and Asgard, all of it, the score fits that. And maybe that's why the score isn't as memorable or as revered as other scores in the MCU. Certainly Alan Silvestri doing an incredible job with the Avengers stuff. And some of the Captain America stuff is incredible as well. So maybe just this is one that gets caught up with the time that it was dropped and the time that it was made. It's not a score that necessarily stands out that strongly to me as well. And there aren't that many emotion. Well, I guess there are, but I don't feel the score when I'm watching those emotional beats, I guess.
Yeah. So, yeah. Can I ask a stupid question that has no answer?
Okay.
What makes a god in the Marvel universe? Like, why are these? So there are a bunch of super powerful people from all
Yes.
over the galaxy.
Yes.
Many of them seem to live forever.
Yes.
Some of them are gods.
Yeah.
Some of them are not. Is there a definition of what makes them gods?
Yeah, there must be some delineation, right? Isn't mythology, but if you're part of a mythology, then you're a god. Isn't that how it works?
I don't know. I mean, there are characters in mythology who are not gods.
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
I mean,
Well,
I think you know what it is. Okay, here in a mythology,
yeah.
a mythology deals with the creation of the universe,
Yes.
and so in Greek mythology, there are the Titans, and then there's Zeus, and there's Gaia, and that's how the universe comes into be, and this is how humans came to be, and so if you believe in that mythology, then they are gods.
Right.
But if you have multiple mythologies, and did Thor and Odin create the universe?
It feels like Odin created the universe. It feels like Odin is essentially Zeus in the Norse mythology. So Thor is essentially Christ, the Christ figure to the God figure, and Loki being the devil figure to the Christ figure in Norse mythology. Now, this might blow some of you religious people's minds, but yes, this kind of stuff has been around for quite some time in different cultures in the same formats. So you do sense here that, and the mother is killed in the second movie. I think Frigga does die at some point in the comics. So it's that kind of thing. So you have a little bit of a sacrifice within the overall story here. So interesting, Steve. So yeah, I think if you're connected to Odin, you're a god in some way. But if you're not connected to him, even if it's not by blood, you're not a god. Like, I don't think the three warriors or the Warriors 3 are gods. I think they're demigods. I don't think they're gods.
I think I kind of go like, this is just a name that we called this group of powerful people. We call them gods. We call these ones Titans. We call these ones Eternals. We call these ones, we just have different names for the super powerful people that we run across.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like Eric Gregner here. Eric Gregner trying to drop all the knowledge on us. He says, I stand by my statement. Dead Again and Hamlet are have well composed mise en scène, but they lack a vibrancy and depth that has been more apparent in his work of late. One way I think he has improved as a director. That might be fair.
Did you hear him, by the way? He was on Mark Maron a couple of months ago.
Branagh? Yes, I loved that interview. So good.
I didn't know him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, right. I didn't know he was a working class guy from poor family who went with the rich kids at the elite school to learn Shakespeare in a different way. I had no idea he was blood and guts Shakespeare. And after the interview, I mean, it made me reappreciate Henry V even more. And that may be why it worked on me at a young age so well when I didn't understand how to break through Shakespeare, because he presented in a way that was from the working class approach.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I didn't know that he was just this intense, passionate, somewhat crazy, energetic artist guy. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like he was just like a talk a mile a minute, there was just passion just pouring off of him.
Right.
I think he's I'm really glad. It's a really good interview, and I really feel like I got to know him in a different way.
Yeah. My dad, towards the end of his life, the way he didn't like a movie, he didn't like a movie. He fell asleep in the movie. Okay, this is my dad. He stayed awake for all 4 hours of Hamlet. We went to see it in DC in the Uptown. He didn't sleep once, and I thought for sure my father was going to fall asleep, and he enjoyed the hell out of it. And so there's an approach he has that I guess we hadn't even known, maybe on a subconscious level. We may have glimpsed it, but it wasn't until I listened to the interview, as you said, you listened to the interview, that it changed your perspective on him completely.
I think, how there are various people, like Barack Obama puts out his list of favorite books and favorite movies your dad's list of favorite movies fascinates me.
It's fascinating. He fell asleep through Braveheart, but he loved the shit out of Amadeus. You know what I'm saying? It's crazy. It really is. He was an unusual cat in all the best ways, for sure.
I wonder, I never met your father. I wish that I had. there had to be some artist in him. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
There was a deep, sensitive person. Maybe he didn't show it to you very often, but he had to be in there.
Oh, I think that at the tail end of his life, he did show it, and it helped me to understand why he was so abrasive to us in his younger years, because that sensitive thing inside of him in an overtly masculine Latino culture was ridiculed. And so he had to develop an angry, thick skin to survive, to fight against it, to not be called names, to not be seen in a certain way. And that overdeveloped sense of machismo is what kind of wrecked some of our relationships early on with all his kids, the relationships early on in our upbringing. And that was the stuff that later on, when he got cancer and diabetes, that he kind of dropped the walls as he got older and was able to talk about it more. And yeah, I agree. My father was an artist, a sensitive artist, incredibly intelligent in his own way, and just an unfortunate victim of circumstance for his upbringing and an area of upbringing as well. So my
dad was certainly not an artist. I don't think he had anything like that in him at all. Super smart guy.
Yeah,
my dad was
a smart guy. I love to.
Oh, yeah. He was really smart. But my dad was always smart in a linear way, not in a creative way. So like I've told you the Trivial Pursuit story about my dad, right?
Please tell it again.
So my dad was an incredible game player. Like, and not only would he beat you at dominoes and bridge and hearts and gin, and he paid his way through optometric school by gambling at gin. Like that was a big part of it. But he would insult you as you played and he would tell you the cards that you were in your hand and why you should.
Your dad was a trash talker.
Oh yeah. And it was always teaching you, like, you should have played the 3 of hearts, because then this would have happened and that would have happened. And I was like, Dad, I can't. So when we played Trivial Pursuit, how you play it, like you have the little pie and you put the pieces in the pie and you get the middle and win. My dad's goal was to get all the pieces of the pie, get to the middle, win, and then go around again, take all the pieces out and get to the middle and win again before anyone else in the family could win.
Yeah.
Which he frequently did. But he wasn't a creative thinker. Anyway, I wasn't going to tell you that.
I disagree with you. To talk trash, you have to be creative. To be a good trash talker and know the buttons to push in order to beat people, you have to be. And look, a guy who gambles to pay for their schooling.
Oh yeah,
there's a certain level of creativity in that is not as linear as you think, Steve. So he may have been linear as he got older, but I think he was creative in his own way.
It's a good point. And well, he was super smart, and it's not he wasn't artistic, I guess, is maybe more accurate.
Yeah, okay.
Here's another quick story, just because it occurred to me, and I don't have that much more to say about Thor anyway. So my dad always beat me at ping pong, and I go off
fucking ping pong. Yeah.
And I go off to college, and in the dorms there's a ping pong table, and I'm at Berkeley, which has a huge Asian population.
Yes.
And at lunch every day, I played ping pong with a bunch of Chinese guys and got the shit kicked out of me for a semester, but I got good.
Yeah.
And and really got good at ping pong. And I went, okay, when I get back home, I'm going to challenge my dad to ping pong. I'm going to kick his ass. And I get back home. He starts talking trash. And my dad likes to put lots of spin on the ball. And I go, I got to outspin him. And he kicked the shit out of me. And I was so angry because I was like, no, I know I'm better than him.
Right.
And he got in my head. And so I went back, and it was full Rocky. I went back to the dorm. I played even more ping pong in the dorm. And then I came back and I destroyed him. And not only did I destroy him, but I started beating him left-handed.
Whoa! So
and not telling him.
Exactly what he did. You learned from your father the lessons. Because beating him left-handed is essentially going back, taking the pieces out, and winning them again before anybody else can win.
That's exactly it. But I didn't actually tell him.
He might have been proud of you for doing that.
He would have been. Okay. He definitely would have been. That was how his brain worked. I don't actually like beating someone. I like playing well.
You're not a trash talker that I've discovered. Unless you're doing something in the judo gyms that I don't know about. I don't sense that you're a trash talker.
No.
I don't mean that in a negative way either. I just
No.
Sense of truth, right?
Not my nature.
I love that Eric had Steve pulled the Princess Bride. You're not left-handed. All right, Steve, anything more to say before we wrap up? I mean, I think it's perfect that we talk dad stories on the Thor conversation, all about father-son stuff. But anything more to say on this one?
Only that I am totally looking forward to 2025, 6, 7, 8 when we do Ragnarok. I don't know when that's going to be.
Yeah.
But I'm totally looking forward to that.
Absolutely. And we're going to keep going down the Marvel path with these movies, step by step, piece by piece, honoring them on their anniversaries of coming out once they cross a certain year. So we're looking forward to catching up on all those. We hope you're enjoying these conversations. We are picking the ones we're going to do full deep dives on, and the ones that we're not will drop on as a Cine-Files live episode. So we're still honoring them in some way through the Cine-Files brand. So there you go. And thank you to everyone who joined us live.
Can I ask a quick question first? Sorry. So next we have Captain America, and then we have Avengers, which actually was 2012.
Yeah.
So my question is for you, and I'm curious what other people think, is Captain America a full Cinephile show or a live show?
In fact, I think we should invite Shannon McClung for that one.
Okay.
Because Shannon and I saw that for the first time together at Comic-Con at a secret screening they had at a theater. At the theater there right by the convention center that was a 10 theater thing. There was maybe 20 people in the theater. Nobody knew what the MCU was going to become. Maybe Feige knew, but nobody knew. And that was the movie where I was like, oh shit, this is going to be something. If they get it right, this is going to be massive. And so, so Shannon and I went back and saw it like 3 more times. Before I stopped watching it in the theater because it was such one of my favorites in the MCU.
Well, you heard it here first. It'll be a full Cine-Files episode with Shannon McClung. And also, so Jack Moon has now asked this question 5 times.
Jack Moon? Yes. Oh, sorry. Jack Moon. Here we go.
Would you ever do Fiddler on the Roof?
Not only would I do Fiddler on the Roof, I might sing the whole fucking show while we're doing Fiddler on the Roof. I love Fiddler on the Roof. Tradition. I mean, Steve has said before, officially on the show, that I'm an honorary Jew. So I love Fiddler. I even went one time because before we moved to San Diego, we lived in Beverly Hills, not where you think, ladies and gentlemen. There are lower cost areas of Beverly Hills, and that theater on Wilshire, I think the Royale or whatever it's called.
Yeah,
they had sing-alongs for Fiddler on the Roof during the Jewish holidays. And I went one time and I sat there and I had the greatest time listening to these older Jewish people singing along to all the songs and seeing how those songs resonated with them emotionally. Do you know what I'm saying? Because I love the songs, but I'm not in the culture. I'm not Jewish. I didn't grow up Jewish. I don't know, I only know it from the outside, but seeing their faces as they sang with such joy, such emotion, such pain, what took Fiddler on the Roof to the next level. Fuck that Rocky Horror shit. Fiddler on the Roof sing along took me to the next level, man. So,
well, it makes, it is an immigrant story. I mean, it's before they immigrate, but it's definitely stuff that you and I have talked about of generational things and moving forward and whether you hold on to the past. I haven't watched it in a long time, and it would be interesting to watch it now.
I think it just came out in 4K. I think
it
just came out over the last year in 4K. I mean, there's so much in that story, as you said. And I think it's John Williams' first Oscar as a composer was Fiddler on the Roof. And this is Norman Jewison, the most appropriate named director for Fiddler on the Roof. So.
And honestly, we've done some heavy movies. We're embarking on what we now call the season of Lee.
True.
Yes. And by the time we get done with that, I could use a nice musical,
Yeah, I'm absolutely down.
So, and no, Jack Moon, I didn't think you were spamming us.
No,
I thought it was a good question.
Yeah, sometimes you have to keep knocking on the door before the door is opened. We opened it, so there we go. All right. No. Quick question: do either of you believe you would be worthy to lift Mjolnir, and what does being worthy actually mean in this? I think that's a good thing to end the show on. Personally, I would never even want to find out if I'm worthy enough to lift Mjolnir myself personally. So I wouldn't even try. And I think being worthy means someone who is good-hearted. And it isn't about like doing everything. It's about being good-hearted, instinctively, impulsively. I think that's a worthy person.
I would 100% try to lift it, just like I would 100% try to pull Excalibur out of the stone. I would totally put on the sorting hat. I would do all of those things.
Well, the sorting hat's different. I
Sure.
would go with the sorting hat. But yeah.
I absolutely, if I had a friend who owned a wand shop, I would want to be the person who, but instead he picked my kid to give a wand to. But, I don't know that I would be worthy, but I do think it's situational. Like, I think that actually, that if in that moment you were going to do the self-sacrificing heroic thing, I think maybe you could pull up Molinar. It's not that you've been perfect your entire life. That's not what being worthy means. It's worthy right now.
Yeah. Right. Fair point. We shall see. I wouldn't do it though, man. I would love it what you were doing if your dad was talking shit the whole time.
Oh my God, he totally would.
Are you sure you want to hold it like that? All right. If you think that's gonna be what you take to lift it, all right. Look at Eric Grebner trying to kick me off my own show. He goes, "Come on, John. Maybe let Steven Mance do it alone." Hey, Eric, when you start a show, you can kick people off your show. Maybe kiss my ass. No way I'm missing doing Fiddler on the Roof with Steve. No
what?
Way. No,
that is the craziest comment I've seen so far. Never.
Yeah, thank you, man. All right, well, let's get on out of here. Thank you all so much for joining us live. The chat was lively as hell all through it, so thank you so much. Please remember, hit a like on this video as you're listening to us wrap up. And if you're watching us later, thank you very much for doing that. Please hit a like as well and leave a comment down below to let us know what you thought about our comments on Thor and what your feelings are about Thor. And don't be afraid to disagree with us. We love hearing some good difference of opinions on films. It's what we enjoy most about doing the Cine-Files. Steve, thanks again. Another fun time. Where can people find you, my man?
SR Morris, that's listed right over there. SR Morris 1 on Instagram. And if you're into Star Trek Enterprise Incidents, which I do with Scott Mance, who will never replace John Rocha. That is, how dare you?
He's clearing up. Eric, I guess, was saying Metropolis, not Fiddler. Metropolis, that's a rough watch, man.
I don't.
If we'd ever do Metropolis,
I think it is an important movie. It is a visually stunning movie.
Yeah.
It is an interesting movie, and much like your dad, it'll put me to sleep.
Yes, I fell asleep through Metropolis like 5 times when we did it for the top 10. It was painful.
Yeah.
But I love silent. Some silent movies I absolutely love.
Sure.
Just was something about it. As for me, you can find me at The Rocha Says on Twitter and on Instagram. My own outlet, The Outlaw Nation on YouTube, youtube.com/John Rocha Says. The Geek Buddies and the top 10 out there, a podcast format to enjoy. And if you want to hang out on Twitch, I'll be doing some more stuff on Twitch. The Outlaw Nation, all one word on Twitch, is there as well. All right, we're out of here. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for joining us. Look for our episode for Spike Lee, our introduction to the season of Lee, coming out this Friday. And if you're a patron of the Cine-Files, you will know that now, or that our most recent Cine-Files short dropped, which is talking about what length or the cutting of the categories. What was it?
It was the Oscars and dumping 8 categories off the live show.
Yeah,
which pissed us off.
Yeah, it did, and we had to stop. It almost became a medium. We were complaining about it for so long. So just letting you guys know, it's definitely something you should listen to for sure. All right, we'll be back next month with another Cine-Files live episode. Thanks again, everybody, and we'll talk to you next time with another brand new show here from the Cine-Files. Peace. Take care of yourselves. Be well while I find the video because I didn't have it queued up. Bye.